She planned the wedding on a Monday. She bought the shovel on a Wednesday. And on Saturday, while the billionaire was on a conference call upstairs, she wheeled his 10-year-old paralyzed daughter to the back of the garden and buried her alive. Nobody saw it, nobody heard it, except a housekeeper who wasn't supposed to be there, and a wheelchair motor humming underneath 2 feet of dirt. Now, before I tell you how this ends, I need you to understand something. Because this story isn't just about evil. It's about the kind of evil that wears perfume, attends charity galas and cries on cue, the kind that learns your pain, studies your guilt, and uses your love for your child as the very weapon to destroy her. This is the story of Marcus Hale, a man who lost his wife in a car crash, watched his daughter lose the ability to walk, blamed himself for both, and then opened his broken heart one more time to exactly the wrong woman. But this is also the story of Rosa Morales, a housekeeper, an immigrant, a woman with no title, no power, no fortune, just sharp eyes, a loyal heart, and the kind of faith that makes you grab a shovel at midnight and start digging. This is a story about what greed does to people, and what love, real, stubborn, unglamorous love, does right back. Stay with me, because by the time we're done here, justice doesn't just arrive, it buries her. Let me paint you a picture of Marcus Hale's life on the surface, because on the surface, it was extraordinary. The Hamptons estate sat on 4 acres of oceanfront property that real estate agents would describe as generational wealth made visible. 14 rooms, a therapy wing he'd built personally for Lily, a private dock, hedgerows trimmed so perfectly they looked painted, a kitchen where Rosa Morales had made the same mac and cheese every Tuesday for 10 years, because Lily asked for it every Tuesday, and some things in this family were sacred. Hale Tech, his company, was worth $6.2 billion on its last valuation, but Marcus didn't build it for the money. Not originally. He built it because he was obsessed with one question: why do we accept that a person loses the ability to move and we just shrug? Why do we act like a paralyzed body is a finished sentence? He didn't accept that, so he built neural prosthetics, smart wheelchairs with biometric alerts and AI assistance, exoskeleton trials for children under 12, a brain-computer interface so sensitive it could detect a user's intent to move half a second before conscious thought. The tech world called him visionary. The disability community called him something more important, one of us. The irony was not lost on anyone who knew the full story, because the reason Marcus Hale devoted billions to disability technology was guilt, pure, relentless, 5 years and counting guilt. It happened on a Thursday night in November, the kind of California night where the Pacific Coast Highway turns into a river and the fog rolls in so thick you can't see the car ahead of you. Marcus was in a glass-walled conference room in San Francisco, 37th floor, a $200 million investment pitch that his CFO said they couldn't reschedule. He'd kissed Lily that morning. He'd promised Sarah he'd be back by 8. He was not back by 8. At 7:43 p.m., Sarah buckled Lily into the back seat of their SUV and pulled out of a school event parking lot. Lily was 5 and had spent the entire event absolutely refusing to eat the carrot sticks and absolutely eating everyone else's cookies, and Sarah was laughing about it on the phone with her own mother as she merged onto the highway. At 7:51 p.m., a semi-truck driver, exhausted, overscheduled, 6 hours passed when he should have stopped, hydroplaned on a standing puddle at 67 miles per hour. The impact was on Sarah's side. She was killed instantly. The coroner said she wouldn't have felt anything. Marcus has spent 5 years deciding whether that was a comfort or not. Lily survived. When they cut her out of the wreckage, she was conscious and asking for her dad. That detail gets Marcus every single time. Even now, he can't say it without his jaw going tight. 5 years old, trapped in a car, and her first instinct was to ask for him. The spinal cord injury was catastrophic. T6 complete, paralyzed from the waist down. No movement below the injury site, no sensation. The neurosurgeon sat Marcus down at 2 a.m. and said the word permanent in a very careful voice, and Marcus nodded like he understood, and then walked to the men's room and put his back against the wall and slid down to the floor. He sat there for 22 minutes. In the weeks that followed, the grief took a shape Marcus hadn't expected. He'd braced for sadness. What he got instead was a low, constant, load-bearing guilt that never fully lifted. A structural thing, more like a wall than a feeling. The kind you stop trying to knock down and just learn to live inside of. He had been on a phone call. He had told Sarah, "Just drive, I'll catch up." He had not been in that car. Those 3 facts became the furniture of his inner life. He rearranged them constantly, looking for a configuration that hurt less. He never found one. So he did what driven, brilliant, grief-stricken men do. He worked. He redirected $400 million of Hale Tech's research budget toward pediatric disability tech. He moved Lily to the Hamptons estate. Ocean air, privacy, space for the therapy equipment, no stairs anywhere in the house. He hired 3 different physical therapists and rotated them so Lily always had someone fresh. He attended every single appointment. He learned to do the PT stretches himself so he could do them with her on weekends. He became, in the clinical sense, an overprotective parent. In the human sense, a father who had already lost one thing he couldn't replace and was absolutely not, going to lose another. Dating was not a concept. When his CFO mentioned, gently, 2 years after the accident, that maybe Marcus should try to have something for himself, Marcus looked at him with an expression so flat and final that his CFO changed the subject and never revisited it. "Lily is my something," Marcus said. And that was that. He had no idea what was coming, but here's what I want you to notice, and this matters for everything that follows. Marcus Hale was a man who had been broken open by grief, rebuilt himself around his daughter, and in doing so had developed one dangerous blind spot. He needed to believe people were good, not naively, not stupidly. He was a sharp man, a businessman who could read a term sheet in minutes and spot a bad deal from across a room. But on a human level, he needed to believe the world was fundamentally decent. Because if it wasn't, if a world existed where a healthy, beautiful family could be destroyed in 8 minutes on a rainy highway for no reason, then the guilt he carried was not just grief. It was evidence that he should have known better, should have stayed, should have protected them. So Marcus chose, unconsciously, to believe people were good, that the world was fair, that love, offered carefully, would be returned in kind. That belief was the crack Elena Voss had been trained to find, and she found it on a Tuesday evening in Manhattan, at a charity gala for children's disability research. The gala was called Beyond Barriers, a fundraiser for children's disability research, held at the Grand Ballroom of the Plaza Hotel in Manhattan. Black tie, crystal chandeliers throwing light in every direction, a string quartet in the corner playing something tasteful. 200 of New York's most carefully dressed people, standing in clusters, holding champagne, performing generosity. Hale Tech was the title sponsor. Marcus attended because his PR team put it on his calendar and his assistant circled it twice. He shook hands. He smiled for photos. He gave a 7-minute speech about neural prosthetics that received a standing ovation he barely noticed. He was thinking about getting home to Lily. He was always thinking about getting home to Lily. And then the keynote speaker walked to the podium. Elena Voss did not walk into a room. She arrived in it. There's a difference, and it's the kind of difference that takes years to engineer and looks completely effortless. She was 32. Chestnut hair swept back with exactly the right amount of carelessness. A deep navy dress that managed to be both elegant and disarming. No excessive jewelry, just one thin gold bracelet on her left wrist. The kind of detail that CD don't need to try more loudly than diamonds ever could. But it was her voice that did it. She opened with a pause, a full 5 seconds of silence while she looked out at the room, not nervously, not performing confidence, just looking, like she was deciding whether the room deserved what she was about to give it. "Then I want to tell you about my cousin James," she told the story slowly, carefully. James was 17 when he was paralyzed in a skiing accident in Vermont, a weekend trip that started as a celebration and ended in a level 1 trauma center. She talked about the months in rehab, the insurance battles, the way the medical system, for all its brilliance, had no real answer for what came after the acute care. The way her family had to fight, document, appeal, fight again, just to get James the adaptive equipment he needed to live a dignified life. "There's a gap," she said, "between what medicine can do and what it actually does for people like James. And the people in that gap, they don't need your sympathy. They need your resources, your technology, and your refusal to accept that gap as normal." She paused again. Her eyes moved through the crowd, unhurried, direct. "That's why what Hail Tech is doing matters," she said, "not because it's impressive technology, but because it closes the gap. It says to a child in a wheelchair, your life is not a lesser version of a life. It's just a life, and it deserves everything." Half the room was in tears. Marcus was not, but something in him, something he hadn't felt move in 2 years, shifted very slightly, like a compass finding north. He found her afterward near the bar. "Your speech was remarkable," he said. She tilted her head slightly. "Yours was better. The part about your daughter, that was real." He went still. He hadn't mentioned Lily by name in the speech. He'd spoken about her obliquely, "a child very close to me," because Lily's privacy was everything. "I read about the accident," Elena said, reading his expression immediately. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have—" "No," he said. "It's fine. It wasn't fine." But she'd already moved past it with the grace of someone who knows when to retreat. "Your tech is giving hope to families like mine," she said, meeting his eyes fully. "James uses one of your smart chairs. It changed everything for him. Your wife would be proud of what you built." 3 things happened in rapid succession inside Marcus Hale at that moment. First, the familiar clench of grief at Sarah's name. Second, the unexpected warmth of hearing it said simply, without the usual careful tiptoeing people performed around him. Third, the realization that this woman was looking at him, not at his net worth, not at his grief, not at his company, but at him, like he was a person rather than a category. He didn't know that she had been studying him for 4 months. That she knew about Sarah's accident, Lily's injury, his guilt, his isolation, his need to believe people were good, all of it, fed to her carefully by someone who had known Marcus Hale his entire life. He didn't know any of that yet. He just knew that for the first time in 2 years, he didn't want the conversation to end. "Can I get you another drink?" he said. Elena smiled. "Not too wide." "Perfectly calibrated. I'd like that," she said. Coffee in Manhattan became dinner in the Hamptons. Dinner became weekends. Weekends became the kind of easy, comfortable rhythm that Marcus hadn't felt since before the accident. The feeling of another adult presence in the house that wasn't a therapist or a staff member or a business associate. Elena was patient with Lily in a way that Marcus noticed immediately and filed away. She never pushed, never performed warmth too loudly. She arrived with adaptive art kits, pressure-sensitive brushes, textured canvases, and sat beside Lily at the dining table and just created alongside her without making it a moment. She learned the names of Lily's stuffed animals without being told twice. She remembered that Lily hated the texture of certain fabrics and quietly stopped wearing anything cashmere when she visited. She asked questions about Lily's therapy and actually listened to the answers. She was never there when she wasn't welcome, and always there when she was. Lily, cautious at first, because Lily was her father's daughter in the ways that mattered, began to soften. First it was Miss Elena, then it was just Elena, and then one evening, Marcus was passing the living room doorway and heard his daughter, in a small shy voice, say, "Mommy Elena, can you pass the blue pencil?" He stopped walking. He stood in that doorway for a long moment, and then he went to the kitchen and sat down and pressed his hands flat on the counter and looked at the grain of the marble for a while. That night he called his CFO, the same one who gently suggested he find something for himself 3 years ago, and said, "You were right." He proposed 8 months later, on a private yacht off Montauk at sunset, with a ring that had been Sarah's mother's, a choice he'd agonized over for weeks. Was it appropriate? Was it unfair to Sarah? Was it unfair to Elena? Was he moving too fast? Rosa had said, when he'd finally asked her opinion, "Mr. Marcus, Sarah wanted you to be happy. That's all she ever wanted. Don't make her want something she can't have just because you feel guilty." He'd gone very quiet after that, And then he'd bought the ring. Elena said yes with tears that looked completely real. She pressed her hand to her mouth. She reached out and held his face. She whispered, "I didn't think I deserved this." Marcus pulled her close and said, "You do." Somewhere across the city, in a penthouse apartment Marcus had never visited, Victor Kane poured himself a glass of scotch and checked his phone. He read Elena's text, 3 words, and smiled. He said yes. Victor raised his glass to the Manhattan skyline and drank. Here is what you need to understand about Rosa Morales. She was not a suspicious woman by nature. She was not someone who looked for the worst in people or expected betrayal around corners. She had lived a hard enough life, leaving Guatemala at 22 with a single bag and a sister's phone number in Queens, that she could have become bitter and hadn't. She'd chosen not to. It was one of the most deliberate choices she'd ever made. She believed in people. She believed in work. She believed that if you showed up, kept your word, and loved the people in your care fiercely enough, the world would eventually be decent in return. That belief had carried her through immigration hearings and 3 low-wage jobs and a daughter she'd lost at birth and a marriage that hadn't survived the grief. It had carried her to Sarah Hale's front door 18 years ago, and into this family, and through the accident, and through the long, terrible aftermath. So when Elena arrived and something in Rosa's chest went quiet and watchful, like a dog that's heard a sound it doesn't recognize yet, Rosa did not trust it immediately. She pushed it down. She told herself, "You're afraid of being replaced. You're being protective. You're projecting your own grief onto a woman who has done nothing wrong." She was right about all of that. And she was wrong about the conclusion. The first thing Rosa noticed was the eyes, not the warmth in them. That was real enough, or real-looking enough. It was what happened to them when Elena thought no one was watching. Elena's public eyes were soft, engaged, present, but Rosa caught the private eyes twice in the first month. Once when Lily's catheter routine ran long and disrupted a dinner Elena had planned, and once when a medical supply delivery blocked the driveway for 20 minutes. The public eyes would have shown patience. The private eyes showed something else. A quick, cold flicker, like a calculator running in the background assessing cost. Most people wouldn't have caught it. Rosa had spent 18 years reading the rooms of a household. She caught it. She said nothing. The second thing was the phone calls. Elena took them in the guest wing, always the guest wing, the farthest corner of the estate, the one that shared a wall with the laundry room and a window that faced the garden rather than the driveway. Rosa was in the laundry room 3 times in the first 2 months when Elena was in the guest wing on a call. The walls in the old part of the estate were not thick. Rosa couldn't make out words. She could make out tone, and the tone was not the warm, easy voice Elena used everywhere else in the house. It was low, rapid, clipped in a way that suggested not urgency but strategy. Rosa told herself, "She's a businesswoman. Business calls are different. That's all." She kept doing laundry. The third thing was the credit card statements. She found them a month before the wedding was scheduled, hidden in the back of the kitchen's utility drawer, behind a box of garbage bags, underneath an old takeout menu from a restaurant that had closed 2 years ago. 3 different cards, all premium, all maxed. Combined balances that Rosa had to read twice before she believed the number. $418,000. Late notices going back 16 months. Before the gala, before Marcus, before any of this. Rosa stood in the kitchen for a long time with those statements in her hand. She thought about the nonprofit Elena ran. She thought about the speech at the gala, the cousin, James, the skiing accident, the insurance battles. She thought about how she'd never heard Elena mention James since. Not once. She photographed the statements with her phone, slid them back behind the garbage bags exactly as she'd found them, closed the drawer. Then she went and made Lily her Tuesday mac and cheese, and she stood at the stove and stirred and thought. She went looking after that, carefully, quietly, the way Rosa did everything that mattered. She found inconsistencies in Elena's stories. Small ones, the kind that only showed up if you were paying attention across months. The cousin, James, who'd been paralyzed in Vermont, turned out to have been, in a later version of the story, paralyzed in Colorado. The skiing accident became a snowboarding accident. The age went from 17 to 19. Rosa wasn't sure if these were lies or just the casual inaccuracies of someone who told many stories to many people. She noticed that Elena never called the nonprofit office, never had work calls about programs, donors, events. She received emails on her laptop. Rosa caught the screen once while bringing coffee. That seemed to involve financial projections she'd have no reason to have if she ran a small women's empowerment organization. She noticed that Elena spent unusual amounts of time near Lily's medication station in the kitchen, the shelf where the supplements and the carefully labeled prescription bottles lived, organized by Rosa into a laminated schedule on the wall. Nothing happened that Rosa ever witnessed. Elena would appear, seem to realize Rosa was there, and drift away, casual, unbothered. Rosa started keeping notes in her phone. Dates, times, observations. She felt foolish doing it. She kept doing it. And then came the night that changed everything. It was 11:40 p.m. on a Wednesday. Rosa had come back downstairs for her reading glasses. She'd left them on the kitchen counter, a habit she kept meaning to break. The main house was quiet. Marcus was traveling for work. Lily was asleep. The guest wing hallway light was on. Rosa was almost at the kitchen when she heard Elena's voice through the wall. Low, rapid. That same clipped tone, but this time the wall was thinner, or the house was quieter, or something had shifted, because this time Rosa could hear words. She stopped walking. She did not breathe. "Victor, I need you to listen to me. The timeline needs to move. He's talking about announcing the trust restructure after the wedding. If that happens, it's twice as complicated. We need Lily out of the picture before that." A pause. Victor speaking. Rosa couldn't hear the other side. "I don't care about comfortable. I care about clean. The paralyzed kid is the roadblock. Once she's out of the picture, permanently, the trust restructures and the money's ours. I just need 6 more weeks." Another pause. "Don't contact Daniel directly. He's paranoid. Let me handle Marcus." The call ended. Rosa stood in the dark hallway and did not move for a very long time. Her first thought was, "I misheard. That's impossible. I misheard." Her second thought arrived immediately after. Honest and cold, "You didn't mishear anything." She went to the kitchen. She got her glasses, went back upstairs, then lay in her bed with her eyes open until 4 a.m. She thought about going to Marcus, but Marcus was in Tokyo, and what would she say? "I heard something through a wall?" Elena would deny it. Elena would produce that perfect public face, those soft, engaged, present eyes, and smile sadly and say Rosa had misunderstood, and Marcus, who needed to believe people were good, who had just bought Sarah's mother's ring for this woman. What would Marcus do? Rosa knew what he would want to believe. She thought about going to the police and saying what exactly? That she'd overheard a phone call through a wall? "I need proof, real proof, something that can't be explained away." She thought to herself. She picked up her phone and opened the Notes app, and she started writing down everything she remembered, every word, verbatim, with the date and time at the top. She didn't know yet that she had 6 weeks. She was going to need every one of them. The last Saturday in September arrived the way beautiful days do in the Hamptons, as if the world had been saving it up. The sky was the specific shade of blue that belongs only to late September on the East Coast, where summer has just loosened its grip and the air has gotten a half-degree cleaner. The ocean glittered. The hedgerows were perfect. The estate looked like a painting of itself. Rosa woke up at 5:30 a.m. and could not go back to sleep. She had been tracking Elena for 6 weeks. She had 17 pages of notes in her phone. She had photographed the credit card statements, 2 additional pieces of mail addressed to an LLC name she didn't recognize, and a printout she'd found face down on the guest wing printer. A pharmaceutical reference page for a compound she'd Googled afterward, a sedative, pharmaceutical grade that produced unconsciousness within 15 to 20 minutes of ingestion and was largely undetectable in a basic toxicology panel without specific screening. Rosa had stared at that printout for a very long time before photographing it and putting it back exactly as she'd found it. She had not slept well in 6 weeks. She had not told Marcus because every time she gathered the courage she looked at his face, the careful, rebuilt hope in it, the way he laughed more now, the way Lily glowed, and she thought, what if I'm wrong? What if I destroy this and I'm wrong? And then she thought, what if you're right and you say nothing? She was still in that argument with herself when Elena came to breakfast and announced the picnic. "I thought today, just the three of us," Elena said, pouring coffee at the kitchen counter, her back half turned in a way that meant she couldn't be fully read. "Before everything gets crazy with the last wedding details, a little family afternoon, in the back garden by the oak tree." Marcus looked up from his laptop. "That sounds perfect. I've got a Tokyo call at 2, but I'll push it." "No, don't push it," Elena said. She turned and smiled, the full, warm smile. "Lily and I will start. You join when you're done. It'll give us girl time." Marcus smiled. "You sure?" "Completely." Lily, who had been drawing at the kitchen table since 8 a.m., looked up with the particular expression she used when something was slightly too good to believe. "Can Rosa come?" There was a half-beat, a pause so small that only Rosa, who was measuring it, would have noticed it. "It's just us three today, sweet girl," Elena said warmly. "Rosa can have a nice quiet afternoon." Lily looked at Rosa. Rosa looked at Lily, and something passed between them. The wordless communication of two people who had spent 10 years learning each other's silences. "That's okay, baby," Rosa said. Her voice came out steady. She was proud of that. "Go have your picnic." Rosa packed the basket. She did it slowly, methodically, watching Elena from the edge of her vision. Sandwiches, fruit, Lily's favorite ginger cookies. Elena added a thermos, her own, from the guest wing, not from the kitchen. She set it in the basket herself. Rosa's hands went still for 1/2 second before she continued packing. Elena wheeled Lily toward the back garden at 1:15 p.m. Rosa stood at the kitchen window and watched them go. She watched Elena choose the path that bent behind the tall hedgerow, the one that curved to the far end of the property, the remote corner by the old oak tree that sat in a natural hollow, lower than the rest of the garden, hidden from the main house by the hedge line and a gentle slope of lawn. Rosa had worked on this property for 10 years. She knew every corner of it. She knew that hollow couldn't be seen from any window in the house. She moved toward the back door, and then Lily's voice floated back through the open garden, bright, carrying, "Happy. Rosa, you don't have to come. It's Mommy Elena's special picnic." Rosa stopped at the door. She went back to the kitchen window. She stood there and watched the spot where the path disappeared behind the hedgerow. At 1:37 p.m., Rosa had been watching the clock. She saw Lily's tablet slide off the arm of her wheelchair. She could see it from the window only because the angle was right, and the sun caught the screen as it fell. It landed face up in the grass. Lily did not pick it up. Lily's hand, which had been moving a moment ago, was still. Rosa was already moving before she'd made the conscious decision to move. She went out the back door at a walk that became a run before she'd cleared the patio. She went through the gap in the hedgerow at the pace of someone who has spent 6 weeks being afraid and is done being afraid. She came around the slope and into the hollow. The blanket was there. The basket was on its side. The ginger cookies were scattered in the grass. Elena was gone. Lily was gone. The tablet lay face up in the sun, Lily's half-finished drawing still glowing on the screen. A picture of the whole family at the wedding, Rosa in the background, holding a tray of empanadas. Lily had drawn Rosa with a halo. Rosa spun around. She scanned the hollow. She looked at the garden shed at the edge of the property, the old storage shed that hadn't been used since Marcus converted the garage, and saw that the padlock was open, hanging loose. The door slightly ajar. She went to the shed. Behind it, on the far side away from the house, the ground was broken, freshly turned soil in a rough rectangle, about 4 feet long, about 2 feet wide. Rosa's brain refused to process it for 1 full second. 1 full terrible second where the information arrived but the meaning couldn't attach to it because the meaning was too monstrous. And then she heard it, faint, mechanical, rhythmic, the small electric hum of a wheelchair motorcycling, the specific pattern it made when the joystick was being depressed but had nowhere to go. A sound Rosa had heard 1,000 times in this house, a sound she would know in any room, in any darkness, at any volume, coming from underneath the ground. There is a moment, and anyone who has ever acted under real terror knows this moment, where the mind goes completely quiet. Not blank, quiet. Rosa Morales hit that moment the instant she understood what she was looking at. She did not scream. She did not freeze. She did not pull out her phone and call someone and wait for them to arrive. She turned and ran to the garden shed. She grabbed the heaviest shovel on the rack. A full-size spade, iron-headed, the kind used for real earth. And she ran back to that rectangle of broken soil and she started digging. The soil was loose, recently turned, not yet settled. That was the only mercy. Elena had not packed it down. Either she hadn't thought to or she hadn't had time, and the spade went in cleanly on the first strike and came up with a full load. Rosa dug. She had a bad left knee from a fall on the estate's icy back steps 3 winters ago. She had not done physical labor like this in years. None of that registered. She dug. 18 inches down, the spade caught on something solid, and she heard the faint metallic ping of iron on aluminum. She dropped the spade, got on her knees in the dirt, and used her hands. Her fingernails split on the 3rd scoop. She didn't notice. She prayed out loud while she dug. Not formally, not the structured prayers she said at Mass on Sundays. The other kind. The kind that comes out like breath when there's nothing left but 2 feet down the top of the wheelchair frame appeared. Rosa dug faster. She cleared the sides, both hands throwing dirt behind her in long sweeping arcs until the shape of the chair emerged from the earth, the way something ancient emerges from excavation. Slowly, impossibly, belonging to a world that wasn't supposed to exist. Lily was in the chair, reclined. Buckled in, Elena had used the full 5-point harness, the one designed to hold Lily securely during transport on rough terrain. Her head was tilted to one side. Her lips had gone pale and slightly blue at the edges, the way lips go when something is wrong with the breathing. Her eyes were closed. Rosa pressed her cheek to Lily's mouth, a breath, shallow, slow. But there, she was breathing. Rosa made a sound then, a sound that had no language. The sound of a woman who has been holding the worst possibility in her chest for 6 weeks and has just discovered, by the thinnest margin imaginable, that the worst possibility did not win. She unbuckled the harness and lifted Lily out of the chair with both arms, all 94 pounds of her, limp and warm, and sat down in the dirt with Lily across her lap the way you hold something that nearly wasn't there. She tilted Lily's head back carefully, opened the airway, watched the chest rise and fall. She pulled out her phone. Her hands were shaking now, the first time they'd shaken since she started digging. She hit record on the camera and panned slowly across the scene, the open grave, the displaced soil, the wheelchair still sitting in the hole, the thermos Elena had brought lying on its side a few feet away, where it had apparently been tossed after its work was done. She documented everything. 47 seconds of footage, steady, deliberate, comprehensive. Back toward the house. She moved quickly, but not running. She didn't want to jostle Lily, just as fast as she could manage while carrying 94 pounds of unconscious child across uneven ground. She was calling Marcus before she reached the back door. The phone rang 4 times. 4 times as Rosa walked, as Lily's shallow breaths brushed against her shoulder, while the golden September afternoon continued on, indifferent and unfeeling. Marcus picked up on the 4th ring, his conference call voice, brisk, half distracted. "Rosa, I'm just finishing up. Mr. Marcus." Her voice was flat, controlled. She had decided during the walk from the hollow that she wouldn't scream. She would stay clear-headed, give him the information in the order he needed it. "Lily is alive. She needs an ambulance immediately. Elena buried her in the garden. I dug her out. Come home now." Then there was a pause, the particular silence of a sentence landing that the brain cannot process in real time. "Rosa." His voice had changed completely. Everything brisk and distracted was gone. "Say that again. Lily is alive and breathing. She was sedated and buried in the garden behind the oak tree. I have her in my arms right now. I'm walking into the house. I need you to call 911 and come home. Right now." She heard the conference call in the background, multiple voices suddenly suspended. She heard Marcus say to whoever was in that room, "Get out." And then to her, "I'm calling 911 from my other phone. Stay on with me. Don't put her down. Talk to me. Is she breathing?" "Yes." Shallow but steady. Rosa replied, her color pale, lips slightly blue. "But she's improving since I got her above ground." "You got her above ground." He said it not as a question, but as if he needed to hear the words exist in the world. "Rosa, you got her above ground." "Yes," she heard him exhale. A long, controlled, completely devastating exhale. "I'm 15 minutes out," he said. "Don't leave her for 1 second. I won't." "Rosa, Yes. He couldn't finish whatever he was going to say. She heard him swallow it. 15 minutes, he said. I'm coming. The ambulance arrived in 11 minutes. The police arrived 4 minutes after that. Elena arrived 9 minutes after the police. She came through the front gate in her car, pulling up to a driveway crowded with emergency vehicles, and for one fraction of a second, before she assembled herself, her face showed something real. Not guilt, not fear, something colder, the expression of a person recalculating. Then the public face went up. She got out of the car, hand to mouth, eyes wide. She moved toward the house with the body language of shock and concern, quick, slightly stumbling steps, the physical vocabulary of a woman who had just come home to a nightmare. The officer who intercepted her at the door said later that she was the most composed, panicked person he'd ever seen. The composure was almost perfect. Almost. It was the hands that gave it away. They were performing distress, pressing to cheeks, covering the mouth. But they weren't shaking. In genuine shock, the hands shake before the face catches up. Elena's face was performing. Her hands were still. "What happened?" she said. "Where's Lily? Is Lily?" "Ma'am, I need you to stay here with me," the officer said. "That's my daughter in there, my fiancée's daughter. I need to—" Elena pretended. "Ma'am, firm, final," the officer said. Then she stopped, and across the foyer, through the living room doorway, she saw Rosa. Rosa was sitting beside the couch where Lily lay, one hand holding Lily's, looking directly at Elena, not with anger, not with triumph, with something that was very nearly pity, the pity you feel for a person who chose, at some fundamental junction of their life, to become the wrong thing. Elena looked at Rosa for 2 seconds. Then she looked at the officer beside her, and she said, "I'd like to speak to an attorney." Marcus arrived home at 2:47 p.m. The driveway was an architecture of emergency. 2 ambulances, 4 police cruisers, a black sedan from the county detective's office, and 1 television news van that had somehow already materialized at the gate, because disaster has its own information network. He was out of the car before it stopped moving. Rosa met him at the front door. She had been waiting there. She had known she needed to be the first face he saw, because the first face in a moment like this becomes the anchor. Marcus looked at her. His face was doing something complicated and controlled. "She's awake," Rosa said immediately. "She asked for you 4 minutes ago." The controlled thing collapsed, just briefly, a single second of raw, uncalculated relief that moved across Marcus Hale's face like weather. Then he pulled it back together. "Where is she?" "Living room. The paramedics have her. She's stable." "She's asking for you." He went past Rosa and then stopped and turned back. "You," he said. He seemed to be searching for words and not finding adequate ones. "You, go see your daughter," Rosa said. "We can talk later." He went. Rosa stayed at the door for a moment. She pressed her back against the frame and looked at the afternoon sky and breathed. Lily was on a gurney when Marcus got to her, oxygen monitor on her finger, 4-line being started by a paramedic, a second EMT noting vitals on a tablet. She was pale and groggy, and her hair was matted with dirt that Rosa hadn't fully been able to brush out. She turned her head when she heard his footsteps. "Dad," she said. Just that. He was on his knees beside the gurney in a motion that bypassed all the billionaire, all the CEO, all the composed public figure, straight down to the floor, eye level with his daughter, both her hands in both of his. "I'm here," he said. "I'm right here, Bug." "Rosa found me," Lily said. Her voice was slow from the sedative, words coming out soft and slightly separated. "I couldn't move, but I could hear the motor. I kept pressing the joystick. I kept pressing it." Marcus closed his eyes for one moment. "I know," he said. "You did so good. You did exactly right." "Rosa heard it," Lily said. And then, with the specific moral clarity of a 10-year-old that bypasses all adult complication, she dug me out of the ground, Dad. With a shovel. And then with her hands. Marcus nodded. He couldn't speak. "She prayed in Spanish," Lily said. "I could hear her. Even under there, I could hear her." The arrest happened at 4:15 p.m. on the front lawn. Elena had maintained the attorney demand for 90 minutes, composed, seated, cooperative. in the way that people who are building a defense are cooperative. When the detective in charge returned from speaking with Rosa, reviewing Rosa's phone footage, and consulting with the county DA's office by phone, he came back with a different posture. He told Elena she was being placed under arrest for attempted murder of a minor. She stood, she let them cuff her, she kept her chin level, and in the moment before the officer placed a hand on her back to guide her toward the vehicle, she looked across the lawn to where Marcus was standing, watching from the steps, Lily beside him in her wheelchair, Rosa's hand on Lily's shoulder. She held his gaze. She didn't say anything. There was nothing in her expression that looked like remorse. What was there instead, very briefly, was something that looked almost like frustration. The specific frustration of an extraordinarily careful plan that had been undone by a variable she hadn't accounted for. A housekeeper with sharp eyes and a shovel. Marcus watched her get into the back of the police vehicle. He watched the door close. He watched the car pull out of the driveway and through the gate. Then he turned to Rosa. "How long?" he said. "How long did you know something was wrong?" Rosa was quiet for a moment. She thought about lying, about protecting him from the guilt of having not seen it himself. She rejected that instantly. This family had had enough of things being buried. 6 weeks, she said. "I wasn't sure. I was afraid of being wrong." 6 weeks, he repeated, not accusingly, absorbing it. "I'm sorry I didn't come to you sooner." He looked at her for a long time. Then he said, "You saved her life. You are not allowed to apologize to me for anything, ever. Do you understand me?" Rosa said nothing. "Rosa, yes," she said quietly. "I understand." At the hospital that evening, while Lily slept and Marcus sat in the chair beside her bed and held her hand, he watched the footage Rosa had sent to his phone. All 47 seconds. He watched it once. He put the phone down and looked at his daughter's face on the pillow. He picked the phone back up, then watched it again. On the third viewing, he stopped it at the 6-second mark. The wheelchair in the hole, the displaced dirt, the thermos on its side. He thought about the charity gala, the navy dress, the pause before she spoke. "Your wife would be proud." He thought about the ring, Sarah's mother's ring. He thought about Lily saying "Mommy Elena" in a shy voice and him crying in the hallway. He set the phone face down on the chair arm. And he sat in the quiet hospital room with his daughter's hand in his, and he stayed there until morning. The investigation moved fast once it moved. Marcus had handed Elena's phone to the arresting officers at the scene. Standard procedure in attempted murder. The phone was seized as evidence. But Marcus also had resources that standard procedure didn't come with. He had a private investigation firm, Hargrove Associates, the best on the East Coast, on retainer for corporate security. He called them from the hospital at midnight and said 4 words, full background, everything. Now. By the time Lily was discharged 3 days later, stable, recovering, furious in the productive way that 10-year-olds are furious about injustice, Hargrove Associates had assembled a picture that made Marcus sit down slowly when they presented it to him and not stand up again for several minutes. Elena Voss was not who she had said she was, not in any meaningful sense. The non-profit existed, technically. It had filed a 501c3 application 4 years ago and received approval. It had a website, updated last in 2023, listing Elena as executive director and listing 2 program officers who, when investigators looked into them, appeared to be friends who'd agreed to be named and done nothing since. Total charitable grants distributed in 4 years of operation, $14,000. Revenues in the same period, primarily Elena's own transfers in, to maintain the appearance of activity. The cousin James investigators could not locate a James Voss or any first cousin of Elena's who had been paralyzed in any skiing or snowboarding accident in any state. What they found instead was a court filing from 2019 in which Elena had sued a former business partner for fraud, and in that filing, references to a cousin James appeared as a character witness statement. A cousin James, who listed a Vermont address, who had not been paralyzed, who was by all accounts healthy and working as a contractor in Burlington. The debt, $418,000 across 3 cards, plus 2 personal loans from private lenders, total obligation closer to $600,000 when interest and penalties were calculated. Originating from a series of failed investments between 2020 and 2022, a luxury lifestyle brand, a real estate venture in Miami, and a stake in a tech startup that had dissolved without product. All of this before the gala, before Marcus. Victor Kane was not a coincidence. The texts went back 19 months, predating the proposal, predating the move to the estate, predating almost everything. The earliest recovered message, from a burner number that Hargrove's forensic team traced to a device registered to a Kane Technologies subsidiary, was 7 words: "She's in. He doesn't suspect anything." What followed across 19 months was a detailed, meticulously maintained record of a conspiracy. Victor Kane was the founder of Kane Tech, the company that had been attempting to acquire Hailtech's neural prosthetic patents for 3 years. 2 hostile takeover attempts, both blocked. Regulatory challenges, both dismissed. Victor had publicly stated at an industry conference in 2023 that Hailtech's patents were the most valuable unacquired IP in the adaptive tech space. He had not stopped trying to acquire them. He had simply changed his method. Elena's role, per the messages, was layered. Layer 1, marry Marcus and gain access to the estate's internal documents, server passwords, patent filing schedules, partnership negotiations. Layer 2, build trust with Lily, position herself as irreplaceable to the family. Layer 3, weaken Lily's health over time to obscure what was coming. Layer 4, remove Lily from the picture in a way that looked either like tragic accident or unexplained disappearance. Layer 5, with Lily gone, the trust restructured, and Victor's team moved on Hailtech, while Marcus was destroyed by grief. The medication tampering was confirmed by a toxicologist hired by the DA's office. Over a period of approximately 12 weeks, Elena had been substituting compounds in Lily's supplement regimen, replacing 2 of the B-complex vitamins with a compound that, at the doses given, produced cumulative fatigue, immune suppression, and mild cognitive slowing. Not enough to raise immediate alarms, enough to make Lily's therapist note unusual fatigue patterns and attribute them to stress. Lily's physical therapist had flagged the fatigue twice in the past month. She had not flagged it to anyone outside the therapy team. She had not known to connect it to anything in the house. Rosa had noticed the fatigue. She had noted it in her phone log in week 2. She had not known what was causing it. The sedative in the thermos was pharmaceutical grade, the same compound Rosa had found on the guest wing printer. It had been sourced through an online pharmacy using a fraudulent prescription attached to a name that did not appear in any medical license database. Hargrove traced the purchase to a credit card in Elena's LLC's name. When Marcus finished reading the investigation summary, he set it on the table. He looked at his hands for a moment. Then he said to the lead investigator very quietly, "What's the strongest possible charge on Victor Kane?" The investigator said, "Criminal conspiracy, attempted murder as co-conspirator, wire fraud, corporate espionage, possibly more as we dig." Marcus nodded once. "Dig," he said. The second revelation arrived like the first, not dramatically but with the quiet, devastating precision of something that has been true for a long time finally becoming visible. It was Hargrove's lead analyst who found it. She'd been tracing Victor Kane's network, following financial threads, shell companies, intermediary payments, when she hit a name that made her stop and check her source data twice before she brought it forward. She called Marcus directly. She said, "Mr. Hale, before I tell you what I found, I want you to be sitting down." Marcus said, "I'm always sitting down these days." "What is it?" She told him, "Daniel Hale." Marcus's older brother was 4 years his senior. They had grown up in the same house in Palo Alto, attended the same schools, competed in the same spaces in the overlapping way of brothers who are close in age and very different in temperament. Daniel was the eldest, the one who was supposed to inherit the mantle. Smart, educated, primed, their father's investment portfolio, their grandfather's trust, the family name that still meant something in certain rooms. Daniel had built a career in venture capital that had, for about 8 years, been genuinely impressive. And then it hadn't been. The collapse was gradual and then sudden, the way financial collapses tend to be. Bad bets compounded by pride, compounded by the particular stubbornness of a man who cannot admit he's wrong. By the time Marcus's company had reached $1 billion valuation, Daniel was quietly restructuring debts and publicly maintaining the fiction that everything was fine. Marcus had tried. He'd made calls, sent money through indirect channels so Daniel wouldn't have to ask for it, invited him to events, included him in family milestones, treated him, always carefully, as an equal. Daniel had accepted the money with a tight smile and the resentment of someone who knows they're being managed. What Marcus didn't know, what no one knew, because Daniel was meticulous about the one thing he was still good at, which was appearing normal, was that Daniel had spent the past 3 years building something in the background. The grandfather's trust had a clause, buried in 70 pages of legal language drafted in 1987 by an attorney who had since died and whose drafting choices had never been meaningfully reviewed. The clause stated, in the convoluted language of estate law, that if the primary heir of the second generation died without issue and the secondary heir of the second generation had remarried within a specified period to a spouse deemed to have acted in bad faith toward the estate, the controlling shares of any business interest held by the family trust reverted to the eldest surviving male in the family line. In plain English, if Lily died before inheriting and Marcus remarried badly, Daniel got Hale Tech. Daniel had found this clause. He had had it reviewed quietly by 2 different estate attorneys, both paid in cash, both signed to NDAs. Both attorneys told him the clause was legally enforceable. Both attorneys told him it would be extraordinarily difficult to trigger in practice. Daniel had decided that the difficulty was an engineering problem, not a moral one. He had found Victor Kane at a tech industry dinner in San Francisco 14 months before the gala. He had identified their shared interest. Victor wanted the patents, Daniel wanted the shares, and he had proposed an arrangement. He would provide the intelligence. Victor would provide the funding and the operator. The operator was Elena. Daniel had known Marcus for 44 years. He knew the guilt that Marcus carried about the accident. He knew the isolation that had followed. He knew what Marcus needed to hear, in what kind of voice, in what kind of setting, to believe it. He had written a brief. Hargrove found it in an encrypted folder on a cloud storage account, 12 pages, detailing Marcus's psychological vulnerabilities, his relationship history, his specific needs, his gaps. A profile prepared with the cold precision of a man who had spent 4 decades watching his brother and filing it all away. He had handed it to Victor. Victor had handed it to Elena. Elena had read it carefully, and then she had gone to a charity gala in a navy dress and paused for 5 seconds at a podium and chosen her first words with the care of a surgeon. The accident report was the last thing. Rosa had saved everything. All 17 pages of phone notes, all photographs, everything. But it was Hargrove, digging into Daniel's financial history following the thread of payments made through shell companies over the past 7 years, who found the transfer, $280,000, wired 11 days before the Pacific Coast Highway accident, originating from an LLC registered to a Delaware address. Recipient, an account traced, through 4 intermediaries, to a logistics company that had employed the semi-truck driver. The LLC dissolved 6 weeks after the accident. Hargrove traced the LLC's founding documents. They required 2 more days and a forensic accountant. At the end of those 2 days, the founding documents showed a registered agent whose name appeared on 2 other documents in Daniel Hale's financial history. It took the FBI, whom Marcus had called the day after Elena's arrest, quietly and with the full resources of Hale Tech's legal team, 4 additional days to confirm it. The accident on the Pacific Coast Highway had been arranged. Sarah had not been killed by random tragedy on a rainy night. She had been killed because she was in the way. Because Daniel had decided, 5 years ago, that the fastest path to what he wanted ran through Marcus's grief, and that a grieving, guilty, isolated Marcus was far more vulnerable than a Marcus with a strong partner beside him. The semi-truck driver had received money. He had been told it was for information about a route, a story so thin it embarrassed the FBI agent who relayed it. He had not asked enough questions. He had made a choice. Lily's paralysis, the injury that had defined the last 5 years of her life, that had cost her her mother, her mobility, her first years of childhood, that had driven her father to rebuild an entire industry in an act of guilt-soaked love, was not random. It was collateral damage from her uncle's plan. Marcus received this information in his home office, alone. He had asked Rosa to take Lily to the beach. It was a mild afternoon, Lily had been asking, and Rosa had understood without being told that Marcus needed the house empty. He sat with the Hargrove report for a long time. He thought about Daniel at Sarah's funeral, standing at the graveside in a dark suit, hand on Marcus's shoulder, saying, "I'm so sorry, Marcus. She was extraordinary." He thought about every holiday since, every strained dinner, every moment of carefully performed brotherly normalcy. He thought about Lily pressing the wheelchair joystick in the dark under 2 feet of soil. He picked up his phone. He called his attorney. He said, "I need you to contact the FBI agent on the Kane case. Tell them we have new information on the origin of the accident 5 years ago, and tell them we need a second arrest warrant." He set the phone down. He sat in the quiet office for a moment longer. Then he went to the window and looked out at the ocean. The water was doing what it always did, moving, constant, indifferent. The same water that had been there the night of the accident. The same water that had been there every morning of the 5 years since. Marcus had spent 5 years blaming himself for not being in that car. He now understood that the thing that put his family in danger had never been his absence. It had been his brother's presence. He stood at the window for a while longer. Then he turned away from it and went to get his coat and walked down to the beach to find his daughter, out on bail, posted by Victor Kane's attorneys. Elena made the kind of decision that only truly arrogant people make. She went after Rosa. Not personally. She wasn't stupid enough for that. 2 men showed up outside Rosa's apartment building in Queens on a Wednesday evening, parked across the street, engines off, waiting with the particular patience of people who have been paid to wait. Rosa spotted them from her 3rd-floor window. She had grown up in a country where you learned early what that kind of stillness meant. She didn't panic. She put on her coat, walked calmly to the building's basement laundry exit, came out through the side alley, and walked 4 blocks to a diner on Northern Boulevard, where the lighting was bright and the booths faced the door. She ordered coffee. She called Marcus. He had 2 security personnel at that diner in 9 minutes. While she waited, she video called Lily. Lily answered immediately, propped up in bed, tablet on her knees, working on page 4 of volume 1 of her graphic novel. She turned the screen to show Rosa the latest panel, a woman in a red cape standing over an open hole in the ground, one fist raised. "That's you," Lily said. Rosa looked at it for a long moment. "You gave me a cape now, too." "You earned it," Lily said simply. Rosa laughed, the kind of laugh that comes from somewhere deep and tired and grateful. She was still laughing when the security team came through the diner door. The FBI moved on a Thursday morning, quietly, efficiently. The way federal operations move when they've had 3 weeks to prepare and the evidence is airtight. Victor Kane was arrested at his Manhattan penthouse at 6:14 a.m. He answered the door in a bathrobe. He asked to call his attorney. He was told he could do that at the field office. Daniel Hale was arrested at his Boston apartment at 6:31 a.m. He did not ask for anything. He looked at the agents at his door and then at the floor, and he stepped back and let them in without a word. The agents noted in their report that he seemed, of all things, relieved, as if something he'd been carrying for a very long time had finally been set down. Elena's bail was revoked by noon. She was back in custody before dinner. The charges collectively across the 3 of them: attempted murder of a minor, criminal conspiracy, wire fraud, corporate espionage, and, for Daniel alone, first-degree murder in the death of Dr. Sarah Hale. Kane Tech's board removed Victor Kane by emergency vote before the markets closed. The company's stock dropped 34% in 4 hours. The family trust clause was brought before a judge the following week. Marcus's attorneys had found the counter provision, buried even deeper than Daniel's clause, placed there by their grandfather as if he'd understood that power without accountability was just a slow disaster. Any beneficiary found to have acted against the family with malicious intent was stripped of all rights and claims, retroactively and permanently. The judge took 12 minutes to rule. Daniel Hale received nothing. Marcus stood at a podium outside FBI field offices in Manhattan on a Tuesday morning in November. He had written no notes. He didn't need them. The cameras were everywhere. The story had broken 3 days earlier. Billionaire's fiancé buried Paralyzed daughter alive and had done what enormous stories do, consumed everything in its path, every major network, every platform, every corner of the internet that processes outrage and justice, and the specific satisfaction of watching the wicked caught. Marcus stood at the podium and waited for the room to settle. Then he said, "My daughter is 10 years old. She survived a car crash that took her mother. She survived a catastrophic spinal cord injury. She survived being sedated and buried in the ground by a woman she called Mommy Elena." He paused. "She is currently at home in the Hamptons, eating an amount of empanadas that I have been advised not to interfere with, and working on a graphic novel series she has informed me will be, quote, at least 12 volumes. A ripple of laughter moved through the room, the releasing kind. "Lily is not a tragedy. She is the strongest person I have ever known. And the second strongest person I have ever known is a woman named Rosa Morales, who dug my daughter out of the ground with her bare hands and her own 2 knees in the dirt, and then stood in a hospital corridor and told me, when I couldn't find words, to go see my daughter." He looked directly into the cameras. "I want the world to know her name. Rosa Morales, remember it." He stepped back from the podium. That was all. Rosa became Director of Family Operations. Marcus's title, created specifically for her. The salary made her sit down when she heard it. She accepted on one condition: she still made the empanadas herself. The Sarah Hale Foundation, launched 3 months after the arrests, a non-profit funding adaptive technology and accessibility programs for children in underserved communities across the country. Rosa was named to the advisory board. She attended the first board meeting in a blazer she bought specifically for the occasion, and spent the entire drive home mildly overwhelmed and deeply pleased. Lily began exoskeleton trials in December, second-generation AI-assisted, built on Hale-Tech's latest neural interface tech. The trials were slow, 2 steps one day, 4 the next, rest days in between. Progress measured in inches and celebrated like miles. On a Tuesday afternoon in January, Marcus sat with his attention feigned on his phone while Rosa pretended to straighten a shelf she had already tidied. Lily, with measured steps, crossed the therapy room floor, counting 11 paces. She paused, took a deep breath, looked up at her dad. Marcus's face came completely undone. All of it. Every wall. 11, Lily said. "I'm doing 12 tomorrow." Rosa had to leave the room. She stood in the hallway with her hand over her mouth, back against the wall, and cried the way you cry when something lost comes partway back. Not all the way, maybe never all the way, but enough. Enough to matter. Enough to build on. On a mild afternoon in early spring, they had a picnic in the back garden by the old oak tree. Marcus spread the blanket on his own. Rosa brought empanadas, mac and cheese in a thermos, the same thermos from the kitchen, the one that had always sat on the second shelf, and sparkling cider in paper cups, because Lily said paper cups made everything more fun, and nobody argued with her about things like that anymore. They ate. Beyond the hedgerow, the ocean shifted. The light was that distinct, gold of late afternoon, the kind that turns ordinary things into something that feels like it was always meant to be a painting. Lily showed Rosa the latest pages of the graphic novel. The hero, red cape, iron shovel, sensible shoes, had just rescued a child from an underground chamber, while a villain in a navy dress fled into the distance, growing smaller and smaller with every panel until the last frame, where she was just a tiny figure at the very edge of the page, almost gone. Rosa studied that last frame for a long time. "You're a good artist," she said. "I know," said Lily. Marcus laughed. Rosa laughed. Lily smiled, the kind of smile children wear when they know the adults around them are at ease. At some point, Lily tilted her face up to the sky, the same garden, the same October light that Elena had once chosen for her plan, and said, "Dad?" 3 months into her pre-trial detention, Elena Voss requested a meeting with her attorney. She'd been quiet since the arrest, cooperative enough on the surface. Her attorney had described her as composed, which was the most charitable word available, but this meeting was different. She sat down across the table, she folded her hands, and she said, carefully, deliberately, with the measured calm of someone who has spent 3 months deciding exactly when to play the last card. There's a fourth person, someone the FBI hasn't found, someone who had access to Hailtech's internal security architecture 6 months before any of this happened, someone who is still inside the company right now. Her attorney leaned forward. Elena smiled. The first real smile since her arrest. Not the public smile, not the performed warmth. Something underneath all of that. Something that had been waiting. Tell Marcus Hale, the buried secret doesn't end with me.